Chapter 85. The green chakra wrapped around Otsutsuki Hagoromo's body was extremely powerful, and Dustless, who was more than 100 feet away, could feel the vague oppression. This indescribable strange feeling was not a gap in strength, but a perception similar to the quality of chakra. Just like the chakra of tailed beasts and humans, the power of chakra of tailed beasts is much stronger than that of ordinary human chakra. The Tensigen's chakra mode in front of him is also superior to ordinary chakra. It's worthy of the legendary Tensigen. Looking at Otsutsuki Hagoromo, who was wrapped in green light, Dustless sincerely praised. Compared to the strongest Sharingan that can destroy and create the world, the Tensigen in front of him is not inferior at all. How dare you steal the Gedo Mazo? Do you know what that thing is? Otsutsuki Hagoromo, who activated the Tensigen chakra mode, glared at Dustless, and the hostility spreading from her body was particularly fierce. Seeing that Dustless didn't intend to attack immediately, Otsutsuki Hagoromo didn't do anything strange. Naturally, I know it's the shell of the strongest tailed beast, the Jubi. Looking at Otsutsuki Hagoromo's mode, Dustless replied lightly, and his tone showed that he didn't put the Jubi in his eyes at all, as if it was an object that could be transferred at will. You don't know anything. Seeing Dustless answering her serious question so frivolously, Otsutsuki Hagoromo suddenly became furious. Dustless's indifference was obviously negating their clan's efforts to protect the Gedo Mazo for thousands of years. Since you know that the Gedo Mazo is the shell of the Jubi, then you should understand how powerful the Jubi that once destroyed the world was. Speaking of this, Otsutsuki Hagoromo almost roared. Her pretty face was filled with anger, and because of her anger, her chakra was leaking everywhere. So what? Dustless raised his eyelids and looked at the Tensigen girl with pity, and said bluntly, I don't mind telling you, the reason why I stole the Gedo Mazo is to resurrect the Jubi. A vigorous and powerful voice resounded throughout the heavens and earth, stirring up waves of ripples in the endless void. Are you crazy? Otsutsuki Hagura's pupils dilated, looking at Dustless's serious face, and her voice was unusually heavy. As one of the direct descendants of Otsutsuki Himura, she understood the horror of the Jubi, because some ancient documents in the clan recorded the power of the Jubi. Crazy. What a joke. She is indeed a brainless woman with big breasts. Looking at Otsutsuki's towering and proud twin peaks, Dustless swallowed his saliva, and his eyes flashed with unnaturalness. In his previous life, he was at the bottom of society. He was an ordinary member of the public, so he had crooked thoughts about Otsutsuki's stunning beauty. In particular, her temperament was like an ice queen. In front of her, everything seemed to be inferior. This feeling made Dustless extremely uncomfortable. We are all humans. I want to see what's so special about you. Seeing Dustless's aggressive eyes, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's pretty face suddenly swelled red, and she bit her thin lips tightly. Once upon a time, who dared to look at her with such eyes? I tell you, the essence of the existence of this world is deprivation. Ignoring Otsutsuki Hagoromo's anger, Dustless exuded a huge aura. His eyes were like stars, and his whole person was a dazzling star. His stage was the entire moon. Looking at the past and present, there are many people who have the ability to annihilate natural enemies with a snap of their fingers. Otsutsuki Hagoromo and Otsutsuki Hagoromo. But when they had the strength to proudly laugh at the universe, they didn't see one thing clearly. It is because they stand above all living beings. It is because they have the power to surpass all living beings that the world will abandon the grudges in their hearts and willingly give them leadership. It is undeniable that Otsutsuki Hagoromo has indeed set the starting point for the universe, and can barely be regarded as the existence of the god of creation. Wu Chen spoke tirelessly while his clear eyes shone brightly, and then his tone changed abruptly as he continued. But he overlooked the most important thing, the essence of human nature. Speaking of this, Dustless's sneer became more obvious. Yes, Hagoromo is indeed the creator of the world, but it is also because of this unprecedented creator that the world is more aware of the pursuit of power. The pursuit is competition, and competition will inevitably produce losers. Failure means the end of everything, and at the same time, it will produce the so-called evil. What do you want to say? Otsutsuki looked at Dustless with a strange smile on his face, and suddenly a strong uneasiness rose in her heart, especially the pupils full of magic, which made her even more anxious. Sure enough, a stupid woman. Can't you understand such a clear truth? Looking at the puzzled Otsutsuki Hagoromo, Dustless said contemptuously, "There is no so-called fairness in this world where the order is reversed. The essence is plunder." Otsutsuki Kagaya plundered the world, and his descendants Otsutsuki Hagoromo and Otsutsuki Hagoromo also plundered the world. And now, I, Uchiha Dustless, am going to resurrect the Jubi, become a new Jubi Jinchuriki, and plunder the world. The scarlet eyes turned sharply, and a huge and horrifying materialized chakra gushed out. The huge golden figure enlarged, and the boundless chakra raged the world. What an evil feeling! Looking at the golden giant that shrouded Dustless, Otsutsuki Hagoromo said cautiously, and at the same time, her jade fingers were faintly filled with golden light. Child's play. Looking at the golden luster dancing on Hagoromo's fingers, Dustless said contemptuously, and immediately his face flashed with a touch of decisiveness, and suddenly shouted, "Senjutsu Kinsisanu!" Boom! A more majestic and oppressive chakra roared out, and the ground under Dustless's feet suddenly burst open, and the ground within 100 meters cracked and collapsed, revealing the omen of doomsday. Remember my name, Uchiha Dustless, the one who is about to take the Otsutsuki clan, including you. Chapter 86. Suddenly, Kinsusanu's huge body grew again, and under the surprised gaze of Otsutsuki Hagoromo, its size continued to increase. Otsutsuki Hagoromo took a deep breath and looked at Dustless inside Kinsusanu, and a flash of light suddenly flashed in his mind. Only then did he remember that some of the ancient books in the clan seemed to have recorded the surname Uchiha. Like me, he also has the blood of the Otsutsuki clan. Staring at Dustless inside Kinsusanu, Otsutsuki Hagoromo thought to himself, the surname Uchiha is a direct descendant of Indra, so naturally, he has the blood of the Otsutsuki clan. A rebellious person who knowingly breaks the law. His heart was filled with unprecedented anger. Otsutsuki Haruo coldly stared at Wuchen, and his murderous aura penetrated his bones. Ka. Chakra raged, and the two have not yet fully engaged in a confrontation. The ground could not withstand the impact of the two chakra, and broke like paper scraps. Buzz, buzz, buzz. As if endowed with life, the ancient sound of Sanskrit slowly came out from Kinsusanu's mouth, and the sky changed color, and the earth sank, and an unprecedented power of annihilation enveloped every corner of the moon. So big! Her beautiful eyes widened as she looked at the golden giant that blotted out the sky, and her beautiful face changed dramatically, and her heart suddenly sank. She subconsciously looked at the Otsutsuki clan behind her, and her beautiful face was extremely heavy. Otsutsuki Hagoromo himself may be able to resist Dustless's attack, but the Otsutsuki clan is a question mark. Now is not the time for you to worry about others. You'd better pray for yourself. Dustless saw through Otsutsuki Hagoromo's thoughts at a glance, and said indifferently. However, at this moment, Kinsusanu's huge body surface suddenly burst out with many dense green runes, almost covering the entire body of Kinsusanu. What a powerful life force! Feeling the vitality contained in the green runes on Kinsusanu's body, Otsutsuki Haguro was slightly stunned, and her pretty face was full of astonishment. Immediately, from her slender fingers, a golden light suddenly emerged. So, the golden light beam didn't stop. Instead, it continued to devour the chakra in Otsutsuki's body, turning into a beam of light hundreds of meters long. The Tensigen is indeed a dangerous eye. Looking at the ultra-long beam of light that almost cut the sky, Wuchen frowned slightly, and then looked at Otsutsuki Yurako's cold face without fear, casually curling his lips, without the slightest fear. Bring it on, brainless woman with big breasts. Die! Hearing this, the corner of Otsutsuki Haruo's mouth twitched fiercely. Dustless on the left, and on the right big boobs and no brain. Even a clay figurine would have 3 points of anger. The The beam of light that was hundreds of meters long slashed down, carrying her raging anger. The narrow beam directly erupted down. Dustless's eyes couldn't help but light up, looking at the golden beam of light that was hundreds of meters long roaring down towards him. Maybe his glinting fruit also has this ability. Oh, the sharp katana of light was also raised, but compared with the beam of light that was hundreds of meters long, it was not worth mentioning. However, Dustless's expression was unusually calm, holding his hands in front of him, faintly looking at the beam of light that swept across. This is not the real Golden Wheel reincarnation explosion, and it is not enough to shake Kinsusinu. Shaking his head, Dustless whispered, although this move is similar to Golden Wheel reincarnation explosion, the power is too far away. After all, the real Golden Wheel reincarnation explosion is enough to easily cut the moon. Otsutsuki Hagoromo is not Dustless, and the Otsutsuki clan is still here. She can't do this. She can't destroy as unscrupulously as Dustless. Bang! Kinsusinu's katana of light stepped forward, splashing smoke and dust on the ground. Her thick arms held the katana of light, steadily and forcefully slashing forward with all her strength, without the slightest reservation. Whoosh! A huge golden wave of air rushed out from the tip of the katana, fearlessly rushing towards the beam of light that was hundreds of meters long. Boom, boom, boom! The two powerful forces inevitably came into close contact, and a huge spark suddenly soared in the void. After a long while, a destructive wave of air burst out, covering an unprecedented area that almost covered the entire moon, including Dustless and Kinsusinu, who was blown back by this strong impact. Looking from afar, the orbit of the entire moon had actually been misaligned. Bastard, I actually lost? Dustless roared in bewilderment. Although the two moves cancelled each other out, he could still see that he was actually at a disadvantage in the previous blow. It's just SOSO. The corners of Otsutsuki Hagoromo's mouth raised a smug smile, coupled with her indifferent face. This scene was indeed attractive, but Dustless's face was dark, because the object of ridicule was him. I'll let you understand the horror of the Tensigen. Otsutsuki Hagoromo's irregular pupils emitted a dangerous light, and gently raised her hand, and the mountains within a radius of tens of kilometers burst open, and an unprecedented gravitational force spread out. Whoosh! At a glance, countless giant rocks floated in the sky one by one, slowly flying in the direction of Dustless, as if guided by the gods. All of them were fixed on the top of Kinsusinu's head, spinning back and forth. Seeing this scene, Dustless's mouth twitched, and he almost spat out blood. This woman is estimated to be at the same level as Uchiha Madara. No, even stronger than Uchiha Madara. Looking at the dense group of meteorites above Kinsusinu's head, Dustless opened his mouth, but the words that were on the tip of his tongue were swallowed back. Things have already ended here, and he can't say that he surrendered. It seems that I can only fight. His eyes fell on Otsutsuki Hagoromo, and seeing her playful expression, Dustless turned his head and couldn't help but snort angrily, and his eyes were bloodshot. Chapter 87. At a glance, countless meteorites floated in the sky, large and small. Some meteorites were only the size of gravel, and some were as large as a mountain. They completely ignored the so-called law of gravity, and floated in the void so easily. The sky full of meteorites filled the endless void, leisurely and calmly circling above Kinsusinu's head. Controlling gravity, is this the ability of the Tensigen? Or is this just one of the many abilities of the Tensigen? One of the most insignificant abilities of the Tensigen? Dustless raised his clear eyes slightly, and the scarlet Mangekyo Sharingan stirred up faint ripples. Looking at Otsutsuki Haruo, whose silver-white hair was like a fresh waterfall, Dustless frowned slightly, then raised his eyelids slightly, and the streamer in the corner of his eyes vaguely glanced at the group of meteorites, and then dispersed. His emotions were extremely calm, and there was no fear at all. For the sake of the same ancestor, call out the Geto Mazo, and I will spare your life. Staring at Dustless, seeing that Dustless was as indifferent as a rock, a touch of indifference flashed in her beautiful eyes. And then she manipulated many meteorites floating in the sky to land around Consisanu, and countless deep pits suddenly appeared on the ground, and dust flew everywhere. Didn't I say that the reason why I stole the ghetto mazo was to resurrect the Jubi? Stupid woman. You are still so naive, and you want to use your mouth to make me surrender. Dustless's delicate face showed ridicule, and the curve of his mouth was even more disdainful. He looked at Otsutsuki Haruo with a sneer, and the contempt in his eyes was undisguised. Dustless didn't think that Otsutsuki Kagaya's face was big enough for Otsutsuki Yuroku to let him go safely. The so-called not letting him die was probably imprisoning him on the moon forever. Dustless could see that Otsutsuki Haruo was very interested in his jutsu, especially in the body structure. There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell, but you're throwing yourself into it. Since you want to die so much, I'll fulfill your wish. Her phoenix eyes glared at Dustless, and under the Tensigan chakra mode, Yuro's eyes flashed with anger, and she waved her hand down, and countless giant meteorites floating in the void flew towards Consisanu. Boom boom boom. The boundless meteorites fell like a dense rainstorm, although Susanoo also tried its best to resist, smashing the meteorites close to it into ruins one by one. But due to the number of meteorites being too dense, Susanoo was still buried deep inside. Bang bang bang. Huge chunks of the mountain fell from the sky and piled up. In just a few breaths of time, it had formed an unprecedentedly large and vast mountain range. Seeing that Dustless was buried by dustless meteorites, Otsutsuki Haruo's face was filled with anger, and her undulating chest finally calmed down. Her white and tender hand brushed the messy hair beside her ear, and she breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that he's finally decapitated Dash, ka ka ka. Just when Otsutsuki Haruo thought that Dustless was killed, the ground under her feet quickly cracked open, and a golden light gushed out from the ground and stopped in midair. Dustless's right calf suddenly flashed with light, and the golden brilliance instantly shrouded and gathered. Light speed kick. Otsutsuki Haruo calmly looked at the heavy blow that was roaring towards her. Her beautiful face was expressionless, and her temperament was elegant and refined. She didn't put the golden light in her eyes at all. A mere ant wants to shake the heavens and the earth. You're overestimating yourself. Otsutsuki Haruo didn't dodge, and stood indifferently. Her whole body emitted an emerald green defensive energy shield, protecting her inside, directly ignoring the heavy blow that was roaring towards her. Boom! Dustless's foot fell, and the ground suddenly trembled. Countless cracks could be clearly seen, and the ground quickly collapsed. However, the green defensive wall was safe and sound. Especially the hardness that came from his foot made Dustless frown slightly. Looking at the unscathed emerald green defensive wall, he quickly turned into light and opened a distance. What a hard turtle shell! Gently raising his gaze and looking at the unshakable defensive barrier in the distance, Dustless raised his brows slightly, and his eyes were full of caution, muttering to himself in his heart, "What a tricky ability!" Dustless still clearly remembered that in the future, Otsutsuki Haruo had the ability to control the truth-seeking ball. In front of him, Otsutsuki Haruo seemed to be born with the Tensigan, so there was no reason why she couldn't operate it. Whoosh! Just as Dustless was pondering, Otsutsuki Haruo completely activated her defense and turned into a hurricane. When Dustless raised his head and realized that it was her, she had already appeared beside him. Because they were too close, Dustless could clearly smell the body fragrance coming towards him, and the extraordinarily light smell made him slightly absent-minded. He liked this kind of simple and elegant smell very much in his previous life, and he couldn't help but look at the small face close to him. This was the first time that Dustless observed Otsutsuki Haruo so closely. Her deep eyes were as clear as spring water, untainted by even a speck of dust. Her face was delicate, and her facial features were well defined. Due to the intense battle earlier, one could faintly smell the fragrant sweat on her body. Is it possible that she wants to throw herself at me? Looking at Otsutsuki Haruo, Dustless's face was full of doubts, and he couldn't help but think in his heart, and suddenly he was enraptured. However, Dustless obviously overestimated his charm. A strange cool feeling suddenly gushed out from his eyebrows. Dustless was slightly stunned, and subconsciously raised his head, and the scene that came into sight made Dustless lose his ability to think in an instant. He saw Otsutsuki Haruo's hand pressing Dustless's eyebrows, and the cool feeling came from her hand. This guy wants to... Bastard! Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Haruo's indifferent face in surprise, and immediately saw her small hand close to him emitting a green light, and suddenly felt a powerful spirit invading his mind, and he immediately knew what she had made up her mind. Want to use the ability of the Tensigen to extract my memory? You are too naive. Chapter 88. Dustless's face was extremely ugly. Otsutsuki Haguro's idea was nothing more than wanting to use Dustless's memory to obtain the location of the Geto Mazo. After knowing where the Geto Mazo was hidden, he would immediately run to the earth and snatch the Geto Mazo. Don't even think about it. Dustless's body suddenly flashed with a dazzling golden light. His body lost its texture, and his whole body turned into a stream of light, exuding an unusually hot light. It's hot. Feeling the sudden increase in temperature, Otsutsuki Haguro subconsciously retracted her jade fingers. Her jade fingers were burned red, and she couldn't help but stare at Dustless angrily. Seeing Otsutsuki Haguro retracting her hand, Dustless also quickly moved away. You want to extract my memory? Go home and practice for 2 more years. Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Haguro sarcastically, and then said with great disdain. At the same time, he sighed that the Tensigen was worthy of being an eye of the same level as the Rinnegan, and some of its abilities were almost exactly the same. It seems that you know the ability of the Tensigen quite well. Otsutsuki Haguro frowned. Looking at Dustless's omniscient appearance, the Tensigen seemed to be no different from his. Otsutsuki Haguro couldn't help but have doubts in his heart. Not to mention Dustless, who came from a foreign land. Even in the Otsutsuki clan, there are not many people who have really seen the Tensigen. Their understanding is limited to books, and they haven't seen what the real Tensigen looks like. More than just understanding, soon I will have the same eyes as you. Do you think it took me so much effort to come to this ghost place to look for trouble? Completely ignoring Otsutsuki Haguro, Dustless's mouth was swept with a cruel smile, and he had never seen this kind of hand seal before. Summoning Jutsu, Hachibi. Ao ao ao. The monster with 8 tentacles was suddenly summoned by Dustless, and its murderous roar resounded through the moon. The difference was that at this moment, Hachibi's eyes were crimson red. Obviously, it had been forcibly controlled by Dustless. The 8 huge tentacles danced strangely, roaring unscrupulously. The roar from the big mouth was deafening, and the endless impact spread out along with the roar. This is a tailed beast. Looking at the Hachibi's 8 tails, Otsutsuki Haruo was extremely surprised. Immediately, his beautiful eyes stopped on Wu Chun, and his eyes emitted a burst of light. The prerequisite for resurrecting the Jubi is to gather all the 9-tailed beasts. As long as I leave this old man here, even if he has the Geto Maugeto, it will be useless. Haguro was directly then Haguro. Was Hachibi was directly ignored. Then Hachibi. Then tamed to Haguro's. Not to mention that the tailed beast in front of her only has 8 tails. She can even tame the Supreme Kyubi. Now let's destroy the Otsutsuki clan Go Hachibi. Woo. Ao ao ao. As Dustless's voice fell, the Hachibi controlled by Sharingan roared again. Chakra raged, and its huge body turned to look at the gathering place of the Otsutsuki clan in the distance. It opened its big mouth, and the evil energy ball was clearly visible. An unprecedented huge Baijidama was slowly taking shape, and it was about to erupt. You dare to lay hands on my people, you are courting death. Haguro's eyes suddenly turned blood red. Her people were her reverse scale, and she regarded them as the most precious existence. Seeing the Hachibi's Baijidama in the direction of the Otsutsuki clan, her whole body was like the eyes of ice. An endless cold wind swept out from her body. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. The giant tornado, which was powerful enough to easily crush meteorites into pieces, swept quickly toward the Hachibi. Its power was destructive, and everything that came in contact with the hurricane was annihilated. This woman is really ruthless. Feeling the power of the giant chakra tornado, Dustless nodded secretly. If the Hachibi is hit, he will definitely die, and he will die completely. You have to look at the master before beating the dog. You want to kill my pet in front of me. Where is my face? Looking at the tornado that was about to turn the Hachibi into minced meat, Dustless's face suddenly became gloomy, and his Manjikyu Sharingan flashed with an unusually hot luster, and chakra erupted, and a calm and powerful roar resounded between the heaven and earth. Uchiha Flame Formation. On the side of the Hachibi, who was preparing the Baijidama, suddenly a huge flame barrier was formed, and the blazing heat seemed to come from the furnace in the depths of the netherworld. It was extremely hot and extremely stable, protecting the Hachibi. Boom boom boom. The powerful and unparalleled tornado hit the flame barrier, and the two suddenly produced a huge explosion. And the flame barrier was inevitably torn into pieces by the tornado. But the fierce momentum of the silver wheel reincarnation explosion was also turned into dust and completely subsided. Hateful. Seeing that his trick was easily broken, Otsutsuki Hagura stomped his feet in anger, and his eyes flashed with determination. And then he raised his white and tender little hand towards the Hachibi, and a powerful repulsive force erupted. Boom! The Hachibi, who was focused on condensing the Baijidama, was instantly sent flying out of thin air, and his huge body suddenly became as light as paper, and he was bounced hundreds of meters away by the strong repulsive force. Phew! A sharp sound of breaking the air sounded, and looking up, the huge Baijidama was rushing towards the Otsutsuki clan. Although the Hachibi was sent flying before, the Baijidama was successfully condensed and shot out. Seeing that the Bijidama was about to destroy the Otsutsuki clan, Otsutsuki Hagoromo made a prompt decision. His reincarnation eyes flashed with hostility, and a straight golden beam swept out. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. In the blink of an eye, the golden light beam extended for thousands of meters, and caught up with the Baijidama, and under the sluggish gaze of Dustless, the golden light beam went straight towards the Baijidama. He could clearly see that the golden light beam directly penetrated the Baijidama and easily cut it. Chapter 89. The 1,000-meter-long golden beam was like an angry god's full blow, destroying the sky and the earth, splitting the flowing air into two. The Baijidama was easily split in half and burst open, setting off a huge explosion. Not to mention splitting the Baijidama of the Hachibi into two. It wouldn't be difficult to split the entire moon. Boom 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 boom. An ear-piercing and terrifying explosion suddenly shook the sky, and a huge wave of fire suddenly rose from the Otsutsuki clan's residence. Looking at it, the terrifying air waves were like waves of destruction, and the entire Otsutsuki clan was blown up by the dazzling golden light. The energy fluctuation that spread out was really too terrifying. Even Dustless was blown back by that super strong air wave by more than 10 meters. Taking a deep breath, Dustless looked at the huge fireworks over the town where the Otsutsuki clan lived, and he could clearly feel the unprecedented huge power. This is also the Tensigen, and it's more powerful than Otsutsuki Hagura's. Looking at the huge fire in the void, Dustless had an unprecedented bad feeling in his heart, thinking of the terrifying weapon created by the Otsutsuki branch family after the fusion of many Byakugan. His heart suddenly lit up, and he subconsciously looked at Otsutsuki Hagura. Sure enough, Otsutsuki Hagura's face was also full of shock, and even with a little fear. Even if he hit it well, Dustless was still extremely keen to catch it. The depths of Otsutsuki's eyes were cold and desperate. Damn it, without my permission. Who gave you the confidence? Who gave you the right to fight among yourselves? Because of the violent anger, Dustless's face was distorted, and the hostility surging out of his pupils was like an evil ghost, and even the sharp screams of thousands of ghosts could be heard, and his murderous aura burst out. The civil war means that the Otsutsuki clan may end early, and Dustless's Tensigen plan may be ruined. For Dustless, who has no Otsutsuki bloodline, a large number of pure Otsutsuki clan blood must be exchanged for blood. We must stop those damned branch families. Their eyes quickly exchanged glances. But at this moment, Otsutsuki Hagoromo rushed out, giving up the crusade against Dustless, and swept towards the place where the explosion sounded like a hurricane. Seeing Otsutsuki leave, Dustless gritted his teeth and followed. There was something wrong with that enormous power just now. Could it be? Thinking of this, Dustless's face suddenly changed. There are two ways to give birth to the Tensigen. As for the origin of Otsutsuki's Tensigen, Dustless didn't know. The first way is to have the bloodline of Otsutsuki, and then transplant the pure Byakugan. The second way is actually the fusion of countless Byakugan, which is extremely powerful. The power of the moon is from this Tensigen. No wonder Otsutsuki's branch family destroyed the main family, so that's why. Dustless's eyes flashed with a flash of realization. He was afraid that the branch family not only dug out the Byakugan, but also stole the power in the Tensigen, which was formed by the fusion of countless Byakugan, so they dared to attack the main family. Damn things, your clan is all mine. Without my order, you dare to start a war without permission. How dare you? His face suddenly changed. Dustless's murderous intent was revealed, and his eyes shot out a piercing cold light. He has already taken the Otsutsuki clan as his own. Now, without his order, these clowns dared to cause internal strife. It was really hateful. Without the Otsutsuki clan, Dustless wouldn't have the chance to obtain the bloodline of Otsutsuki. Thinking that his plan of using the Tensigen might be ruined, Dustless's speed became even faster, tearing and distorting the void along the way. Boom, boom, boom. Inside the ancient city of Otsutsuki, the ear-piercing sound of explosions continued, and a wave of air completely turned this ancient city, which had existed for thousands of years, into a hell on earth. Looking around, the ground was full of broken corpses and rotten flesh. The ground was almost covered with bright red blood, and the stench of the corpses was everywhere. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the depths of purgatory. A large number of Otsutsuki branch family members were ruthlessly killing the main family members. If they encountered an enemy that was easy to kill, they would directly use the Tensigen weapons to kill them. For a time, it became a one-sided situation. Stop it, you bastards! His voice was filled with boundless rage, as well as a towering killing intent. It was none other than Otsutsuki Ulua, whose face was filled with a sinister coldness. When he saw the members of the Zone clan being slaughtered in an instant, his chest was filled with unprecedented flames. His entire person was like a volcano that was about to erupt, exuding a strong sense of destruction. Haguro's pretty face was filled with anger, his eyes staring at the oval stone-like strange weapons, and the fear in the depths of his eyes flashed away. You're really crazy. Taking a deep breath, Haguro's cold voice resounded through the sky, looking at the round stone with fear, but there was more killing intent in his eyes. Because those are the fusion of the Byakugan. Creating so many Tensigen weapons means that these crazy branch family members slaughtered many of their own family members, and used all their Byakugan to fuse. It's your family who misinterpreted the true meaning of Ancestor Hamura. The world created by Haguro Sanin is a failure, and the turmoil of the past thousands of years has already proved everything. Next to the Tensigen weapons on the ground, a middle-aged man walked out. This middle-aged man's face was pale, his eyes were hollow, and the corners of his mouth were particularly sharp, giving a very feminine feeling. When Otsutsuki Haguro saw this person come out, his eyes suddenly narrowed. The person in front of him was called Otsutsuki Haguro, the master of the branch family. It can be clearly seen that the master of the branch family, Otsutsuki Haguro, has a few black tomo on his chest. He belongs to the Otsutsuki clan with extremely high bloodline purity. In other words, people with high bloodline purity like him are the target of Dustless's hunting. Chapter 90. Otsutsuki Hagoromo looked at the Tensigen weapons on the ground, with a pale face. Looking around, there were no less than 10, reaching a terrifying number of 15. Even if you dig out all the Byakugan of the branch family and the main family, it's impossible to integrate so many Tensigen. Otsutsuki Hagoromo's face was pale. Such a fusion requires a huge number of Byakugan. Each Tensigen weapon requires at least hundreds of pairs of Byakugan, or even thousands of pairs of Byakugan. And this bastard took out 15 at once. It can be seen how many Byakugan he plundered. So what? I just followed the true meaning of Ancestor Himura and destroyed the earth. Even if they pay with their eyes, including myself, they are willing to do so. The middle-aged man named Otsutsuki Hagoromo said indifferently. Even if his eyeballs were also dug out to make Tensigen weapons, he didn't regret it. Your main family can't understand Himura's true meaning at all. Putting aside the past thousands of years of war, this time the Gedo Mazo has been stolen, which has explained everything. Even if Otsutsuki Hagoromo didn't have eyes, he could easily perceive the position of Otsutsuki Hagoromo. Bastard! It's your branch family who misunderstood the true meaning of the ancestor. However, now you even used the Tensigen to destroy the main family. You deserve to die. Otsutsuki Hagoromo said coldly. Her cold voice was like a biting cold wind. And even because of her excessive anger, the blue veins on her forehead could be clearly seen. This group of branch family members has completely fallen. The reason why they have so many Byakugan to make Tensigen weapons is because they stole the power of that. Otsutsuki Hagoromo's face was pale. What she said was naturally the Tensigen. It was the largest Tensigen, and also the source power that provided the moon's rotation. Since the death of Otsutsuki Hagoromo, the Otsutsuki Hagoromo, who died thousands of years ago, would dig out the Byakugan to supplement their power. Are you crazy? Otsutsuki Hagoromo scolded angrily. This guy is crazy enough to extract the Byakugan from the Tensigen that powers the moon. Nonsense! I am only following the wishes of my ancestors. After killing you, the last person of the Zong family, I will completely guide the moon to crash into the earth. This way, even if the Gedo statue is lost, the Jubi will not revive. Yumi Otsutsuki's voice was unusually firm. As long as the moon crashed into the earth, the latter would naturally be destroyed. At that time, no matter who stole the Gedo Mazo, they would inevitably die. You lunatic! Looking at Otsutsuki Hagoromo, and the Tensigen weapons made by the Byakugan behind him, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's eyes showed unprecedented panic. She knew that she was no match for the 15 Byakugan harvesters in front of her. What should we do? We can't leave these branch family members alone. They've already been blinded. Otsutsuki Hagoromo looked at the branch family members who had been completely swallowed by the Byakugan, and her heart inevitably fell to the bottom. Her pretty face was full of resentment, and immediately a bitter smile rose from the corner of her mouth. The Otsutsuki family, which had been passed down for thousands of years, was going to be completely destroyed in her hands. You're really boasting. A mere specimen dares to boast about destroying the world. You're just a crazy child. An unusually harsh voice resounded through the sky, full of magic, and didn't dissipate for a long time. Looking up, it was a leisurely face. No one knew when it started, but it was already standing in the void. But its whole body exuded a cold chill, and its eyes were blood red, filled with boundless raging intent. My future specimen, who gave you the right to start a war? A voice that seemed to come from the depths of hell resounded through the endless void. The cold voice with boundless killing intent made everyone, including Otsutsuki Hagoromo, stunned. Sage art. Yasakani no Magatama. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Boundless golden light roared down, and the dense number dyed the sky golden yellow. The dizzying number formed a large area of energy, and under the golden light, everything was forbidden. Damn it! Looking at the innumerable dense numbers pouring down like a rainstorm, Otsutsuki Hagoromo swallowed hard. Although he couldn't see what was going on outside, he could still feel that he was locked on by thousands of dense destructive rays. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, such a huge range, such a dense number, mercilessly harvested the lives of the Otsutsuki family, almost slaughtering them, because most of these people's eyes were dug out to make Tensigen, and they couldn't completely perceive it. This guy, staring at the cold face of Dustless, Otsutsuki Hagoromo was slightly stunned, and suddenly realized that Dustless chose to invade the moon from thousands of miles away. And now Otsutsuki Hagoromo did this. undoubtedly crossing his bottom line. Serves you right. Looking at the scattered branch family members, Otsutsuki Hagoromo had an indescribable joy in his heart, because it was they who used the Tensigen to destroy the main family. Now retribution has come. Attack for me. The furious Otsutsuki Hagoromo roared, indicating to quickly manipulate the Tensigen to attack Dustless and Hagoromo in the sky. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. 15 Tensigen weapons immediately shot out dazzling rays of light, aiming at Dustless and Hagoromo. The power was extremely powerful, not inferior to the ultimate move of Golden Wheel reincarnation. Insignificant skill. Looking at the light beam rushing towards him, Dustless's face was full of contempt, and with a disdainful attitude, his pupils looked at the light beam coming towards him indifferently, and without dodging, he crossed his arms in front of him. Pucci. The destructive light beam directly penetrated Dustless, but the place where it was penetrated only emitted a faint golden light, and soon the place where it was penetrated was restored, unable to hurt him at all. This kind of pure physical attack is ineffective against me. Chapter 91. Although Dustless can be immune to this terrifying physical attack, Otsutsuki Hagura can't be ignored. She is immortal, and she doesn't have Dustless's heaven-defying ability. Especially when Otsutsuki Hagura saw that it didn't work on Dustless, she used all 15 Tensigen weapons to attack Otsutsuki Hagura. In just a few breaths of time, he was already in a sorry state, completely on the verge of defeat. These things are good. Maybe I can use them in the future. Looking at the Otsutsuki clan's Tensigen weapons on the ground, Dustless's face was full of yearning, and his clear pupils were full of undisguised covetousness. This kind of Tensigen weapon may not be as practical as the Tensigen, but its power is beyond doubt. If there is no such thing as Dustless, the branch family will soon use this to destroy the main family. I can't let her die. Looking at the defeated Otsutsuki Hagura, Dustless frowned slightly. Although this woman is a bit savage and ferocious, she also has the Tensigen, and he can't let her die like this. Even if she is wrong, the Tensigen is right. It seems that I have to use that. Taking a deep breath, Dustless's face was full of determination, and at the same time, his scarlet Mangekyo stared at the besieged Otsutsuki Hagura, and a strong fluctuation suddenly surged in the Mangekyo. A huge aura floated all over his body, and 2 bloodstains suddenly flowed out of the corners of Dustless's eyes. Chakra energy was obviously mixed with the chakra energy of the first generation. It is the brand new dojutsu born after Dustless merged with the cells of the first generation Hashirama. And it is also one of his biggest cards at present. Thank me, stupid woman. But let me use this ultimate ability. It's not without reward. After the matter is done, give me your Tensigen. Divine Providence. After saying that, dark red blood suddenly flowed out of the corners of Dustless's eyes, and his pupils suddenly enlarged. Damn it, am I going to die? Looking at the roaring golden light beam, Otsutsuki Hagura's beautiful eyes dimmed. After a series of battles, there was no chakra left in her body, and the chakra that was born was not enough to save her life, and she will definitely die. Pucci. The golden light directly penetrated Otsutsuki Hagura's body, and pierced her chest directly, and then the light beam completely penetrated her body. This is Otsutsuki Haguro, who thought that he would die, looked at the wound in surprise. There was no blood stain that should be there when he was injured. Instead, there was only a faint golden light, which was very warm. Not to mention the signs of life passing away, there was no sense of the most basic pain. I didn't die. Feeling that her whole body was filled with a warm halo, Otsutsuki Hagura was very surprised, and there was no joy on her pretty face, but she looked at Dustless in the distance in puzzlement. Because in the battle with Dustless, she used this strange trick to ignore any physical attack. Impossible. How can you not die? That guy was penetrated by the light beam of the Tensigen. How can he not die? Otsutsuki Hagura on the ground naturally felt the abnormality of Otsutsuki Hagura, and immediately screamed with endless disbelief and confusion in her tone. How can he not die after being penetrated? This seems to be the ability of that kid. Remembering that Dustless avoided the attack of the Tensigen in such a strange way before, Otsutsuki Hagura was surprised, and at the same time, her pitch-black pupils without eyes swept in the direction of Dustless. Including Otsutsuki Hagura's eyes, all looked at Dustless. TSK. It was discovered after using it once. It seems that this technique is full of loopholes. Seeing that both Otsutsuki Hagura and Hagura were looking at him, Dustless couldn't help but shrug, and then said helplessly, in fact, it was tantamount to admitting the two's thoughts. Why did he save me? Otsutsuki Hagura stared at Dustless with her bright watery eyes, and her hatred for Dustless in her heart gradually decreased, and immediately looked at the large bloodstains in the corner of Dustless's left eye, and her heart was particularly complicated, because she knew that it was caused by saving him, and obviously it cost a lot to save him. Don't thank me. Just give me your Tensigen as a thank you gift afterwards. Seeing Otsutsuki Hagura looking at him with a complicated expression, Dustless touched his nose, and then smiled calmly, as if this was how it should be. You fart. Hearing this, Otsutsuki Hagura's mouth suddenly twitched fiercely, and her words were incoherent. Her good impression of Dustless disappeared in an instant, and her eyebrows were slightly raised, and she couldn't wait to slap Dustless to death. Obviously, Dustless caused her to be smashed into pieces, and the Tensigen was completely destroyed, so he saved her. Don't show such a surprised expression. Manjikyu Sharingan may not be as good as Rinnegan and Tensigen, but this iron rule doesn't seem to work on me. Dustless chuckled softly, and immediately his pupils suddenly narrowed, and the gaze reflected from the slits of his eyes was awe-inspiring and domineering. His whole body was shining, like a shining sword, showing its sharpness and cutting the world. Sharingan is known as the soul portrayal eye. The darker the heart of the host, the stronger the desire for power. The stronger the eye power of the Sharingan will be, and the darker the heart will be. So it is called the soul portrayal eye. Touching his eyes, Dustless wiped the bloodstains from the corners of his eyes, and said in a deep voice, in other words, the more power it pursues, the stronger the eye power will be, and the same is true for the ability of the eye. It is precisely because of Dustless's supreme desire for power that his eye power is abnormally strong, and he has such a strange ability to give the ability of his glint fruit to others. Since you are about to die, I will tell you the ability of my left eye. Divine Providence. This is the ability of my left eye, and it can give any power in my body to others. Chapter 92. Giving one's own ability to others. In fact, this kind of ability that has never been seen before is tantamount to stepping into the realm of gods. And it doesn't belong to the category of the so-called ninjutsu at all. Looking at the ancient sages, there has never been such a heaven-defying dojutsu. Fart. How can a mere mortal's eye have this kind of ability? The first person to refute was naturally Otsutsuki Yumi, with a face full of contempt. Maybe the Sharingan is very powerful. But is it as powerful as the legendary Rinnegan and Tensigen? Obviously it's impossible. How can a mere mortal's eye have such a heaven-defying ability? Who knows? Looking at Otsutsuki Yumi who was ridiculing him, Dustless smiled faintly, but secretly shook his head. He didn't think that the ability of his left eye was so heaven-defying, because compared with the ability of his right eye, it's really not worth mentioning. Giving any of his own power to others. This guy really has this kind of ability that only gods can get involved in. Feeling the difference in her body, Otsutsuki Yumi said in her heart. She can clearly feel the changes in her body, and this is undoubtedly the most right to speak. This guy, looking at Dustless's elegant face, Otsutsuki Yumi's heart was extremely complicated, and her eyes were full of despair. If she guessed correctly, it's very likely that the person who will end the Otsutsuki clan is the invader from the earth in front of her. It was the greatest irony that Otsutsuki, who was above all things in the world, would one day be destroyed by the earthlings who came after him. Quietly staring at the strange Manjikyu Sharingan, Otsutsuki Yumi didn't hate Dustless. Although Dustless said that he will destroy the Otsutsuki clan, The number of people who really died in the hands of Dustless is less than 5. As for how many people of the Branch family were killed by Dustless, it doesn't matter to her. Although the ability of this move is somewhat heaven-defying, it is not invincible. Sighing in his heart, Dustless was slightly disappointed. Every ninjutsu has a weakness, and his divine providence is no exception. For example, Dustless gave his elemental transformation to Otsutsuki Dustless. During this period, Dustless himself can't use elemental transformation. In short, Dustless would not be able to use the ability he had given the other party before he took it back. Summoning technique, 8 tails. Bang! Ao ao ao. A monster with 8 tentacles suddenly appeared. It was Hachibi with many scars all over its body. Its huge eyes were still in the state of 3 Tomo Sharingan. Obviously, it was still controlled by Dustless. This is a tailed beast. Yumi Otsutsuki looked at Hachibi's 8 tails, and immediately noticed the amount of chakra in Hachibi's body. His cold eyes looked at Dustless, and his killing intent became stronger. You should be the one who stole Geto-Mazo, right? Staring at the indifferent Dustless, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Only then did he realize that the loss and traces of the Geto-Mazo were all related to Dustless, an intruder who was not Otsutsuki. It's just a specimen. Since the Geto-Mazo that you Otsutsuki were guarding has been lost, there's no need for it to exist anymore. But someone with a pure Otsutsuki bloodline, like you, can be used as nourishment for the Geto-Mazo, Dustless said bluntly. Anyway, Otsutsuki's main family has been destroyed by the Branch family, but there are still many pure-blooded people, such as Otsutsuki in front of him. The black tomo on his chest explained everything. Although the number is not enough, it can still be cultivated by the Geto-Mazo. After all, Uchiha Madara can use a piece of meat to cultivate countless cells of Hashirama. Although the Otsutsuki clan is fragmented, there are still many special existences. Kill him for me. Hearing this, Otsutsuki was furious. Dustless actually treated the most noble Otsutsuki clan in the world as nourishment. How could he not be angry? Whoosh! The Tensigen weapon immediately aimed at Dustless. Since Dustless has given the elementization ability to Otsutsuki, he naturally can't use elementization to nullify physical attacks. Idiot! It seems that you don't understand the specific use of my left eye. Looking at the rapidly approaching golden light, Wu Chun smiled contemptuously. He calmly jumped onto Hachibi's head and crossed his arms in front of him. His expression was calm, and his indifferent temperament was full of strong confidence. He didn't care about the incoming light at all. Dustless's pupils suddenly widened, and he released his eye power towards the Hachibi under his feet. God's grace. Heaven's gift. Whoosh! Just as the beam of light projected by the Tensigen weapon was about to approach Hachibi and Wuchen, the huge body of Hachibi disappeared strangely, as if it was teleported. On the vast plain, the Hachibi seemed to have never appeared, and together with Dustless on top of his head, they disappeared out of thin air, and the Tensigen light beam that swept over naturally hit nothing. Impossible. Noticing that Dustless and the Hachibi were not crushed by the Tensigen weapon, Otsutsuki's powerful perception ability immediately spread out, surveying the environment within a radius of a few miles one by one, and after realizing that there was no one around, he immediately screamed. What a joke! The huge body of the Hachibi can't just disappear like that. That's impossible. What's there to be surprised about? I should have said before that the ability of my left eye is to bestow everything. I can bestow my ability to all things in the world, including Hachibi. A huge black shadow appeared behind Otsutsuki like a ghost, and its huge body covered the void, suddenly dimming the light. It was Dustless and the Hachibi under his feet. Impossible. How can he move so fast? Otsutsuki looked at Dustless and the Hachibi who appeared behind Otsutsuki in horror, and he rubbed his eyes subconsciously, staring at the incredible scene in front of him. If it was said that Dustless had the speed of light, she could understand it, but the huge body of the Hachibi couldn't move fast at all. especially the speed of light just now. Idiot, there's nothing to be surprised about. Just now, I just gave the speed of light to the Hachibi. Chapter 93. Dustless's eyes were like torches, and the light emitted from his deep and bright pupils was extremely indifferent. His sharp eyes were like an eagle's, and anyone who was stared at by his scarlet Mangekyo would feel a sense of panic. Standing on the head of Hachibi, Dustless bit his white lips and looked at Otsutsuki's empty eyes. His Mangekyo Sharingan stirred up faint ripples, and Hachibi immediately moved. Whoosh! With a sharp sound, Hachibi's huge body suddenly moved, and his movement was extremely fast. Almost in an instant, he jumped across the vast space and instantly arrived in front of the Tensigen weapon. The majestic and endless chakra spread out, and suddenly the earth trembled slightly. Hachibi may not be as strong as Kyubi, and there is a gap in the amount of chakra, but as the second most powerful Bijou, his strength is beyond doubt. If he didn't encounter a natural enemy like Dustless who has Sharingan, I'm afraid not many people can take him down. Looking up suddenly, he saw Hachibi's powerful tentacles sweeping across the ground, and the ground was directly flattened, raising a hurricane-like dust, like a tornado raging in the sky, and the scornful destructive wind directly blew Otsutsuki away. Whoosh! High-density chakra erupted out, rotating at high speed like a deep-sea spring, and the restlessness of destruction filled the palm of Hachibi, and a mini Bijudama was clearly being formed. Mini Bijudama! Whoosh! Looking up, Kuroto saw the mini Bijudama in the Hachibi's hand darting straight forward, leaving a strong destructive aura in the void along the way, and the chakra that hasn't dissipated yet filled the surrounding environment. Boom! The deafening explosion echoed in the boundless sky like a thunderclap. The enormous fiery mushroom cloud rose quickly, igniting the depths of the moon that had been stagnant water. The raging fire covered the sky and the earth, interpreting the meaning of the word destruction to the extreme. The area within several square kilometers seemed to have been enshrouded in a cage of fire. It was scorching hot. In an instant, 5 Tensigen weapons of Otsutsuki were destroyed. Is that Hachibi? Something's wrong. Otsutsuki stood up with difficulty, and without his eyes, he could clearly feel that Hachibi was raging on the moon at a speed that defied common sense. He almost spat out blood uncontrollably, especially when he knew that the Tensigen weapons made by collecting countless Byakugan were destroyed in an instant by Dustless. He was even more hysterical. Hurry up and blast him, and that beast into smithereens! Otsutsuki screamed with anger, and his sharp tone was filled with endless hatred and madness. Obviously, his hatred for Dustless has reached an unprecedented level. The operator of the remaining 10 Tensigen weapons ordered coldly, "Damn native! How dare you disturb my good thing? I will definitely make you pay the price." His amazing perception ability spread out again. Observing the surrounding environment, Otsutsuki gnashed his teeth and said hatefully in his heart, "A mere native from the earth dared to disrupt his plan," and he couldn't help but curse Dustless in his heart, especially when he noticed that Hachibi's godlike speed and strength had increased by at least 10 times in all aspects. That guy didn't give all his power to Hachibi, did he? Otsutsuki muttered to himself, and his face was pale. At this moment, Hachibi was too terrifying. Its speed was fleeting, and its strength was even more terrifying. In fact, as he thought, Dustless really gave all the abilities of the glint-glinting fruit to Hachibi. In other words, this is equivalent to Hachibi eating the glint-glinting fruit, inheriting everything from Dustless. Boom! Boom! With a few harsh explosions, several more weapons made by Tensigen weapons were crushed by Hachibi, setting off a violent explosion. The already bumpy moon was affected by the explosion, and it was even more embarrassed. "I'm not willing." Sensing that another Tensigen weapon was destroyed, Otsutsuki was furious, and his whole body trembled with anger. The Byakugan weapons that were integrated with the Tensigen weapons were all obtained by slaughtering his clansmen, and they were all destroyed by Dustless. How could he be willing? In fact, Dustless also had a bad idea. There was no racial restriction in manipulating these Tensigen weapons, And he also had the mentality of robbing a few, so he didn't destroy all of them. The situation was one-sided, and Hachibi, who was given the glinting fruit by Dustless, was almost invincible, because Hachibi itself belonged to the monster level. The Otsutsuki clansmen were quickly slaughtered by Hachibi controlled by Dustless, and on the bumpy plains, almost all the bodies of the Otsutsuki clansmen, blood flowed like a river, and bones piled up like a mountain. The desolate moon was really quiet this time. Only Dustless, Otsutsuki Yuraku, and Otsutsuki Yumi were left, plus the controlled Hachibi. Looking at the corpses all over the ground, Wuchen took a deep breath, and immediately smiled at Otsutsuki Yumi, who couldn't support himself. The corner of his mouth raised into a teasing smile. Being in the sea of blood filled with the strong smell of blood, there was no discomfort. Otsutsuki Tonari, goodbye. The Otsutsuki clan was completely destroyed, and Otsutsuki Tonari must have been killed in advance. At present, only Otsutsuki Hagoromo and Otsutsuki Hagoromo can be left. As long as Otsutsuki Hagoromo is completely eliminated, and the bloodline of Otsutsuki can be collected. As for her, his eyes turned slightly, staring at the expressionless Otsutsuki Hagoromo. Dustless couldn't help but sigh that a woman's heart was like a needle in the sea. Before, because he wanted to use Hachibi to kill Otsutsuki, this woman fought with him, but now she has become indifferent, and Dustless can't figure out what she is thinking. Maybe she only has the clan in her heart. Shaking his head, Dustless was too lazy to think about it. Maybe when Otsutsuki Hagoromo used the Tensigen weapons to destroy the clan, her heart was completely dead. Chapter 94. The existence of Otsutsuki was to guard the Geto Mazo. Now that the Geto Mazo has been lost, the meaning of Otsutsuki's existence has also lost its value. The game ends here. Jumping down from the Hachibi's head, Dustless looked at Otsutsuki, who was paralyzed on the ground, as if he had lost his soul, and a contemptuous smile appeared on his thin lips. His eyelids drooped, and his eyes were cold. Although it's a lot different from the beginning of the plan, the destruction of your Otsutsuki clan. I was indeed in the calculation of my plan a long time ago. Looking at Otsutsuki, who looked like he had his bones pulled out, Dustless's breath was cold. This guy in front of him had the pure blood of the Otsutsuki clan, and it was absolutely comparable to Otsutsuki Iroh's. Boom! Dustless directly used Genjutsu to invade Otsutsuki's spiritual world, and put him on the ground. Only then did he feel relieved, and his tense spirit relaxed. Dustless's main purpose of coming to the moon was to obtain the blood of Otsutsuki. This guy in front of him had the purest blood, and he was undoubtedly the most suitable to be trained with the Geto Mazo. Damn Uchiha Madara. Thinking that the Geto Mazo was still in the hands of Madara, Dustless could only sigh silently. After integrating with Hashirama's cells, although he could control the Geto Mazo, it was unrealistic to take it away from Madara. It seems that only after Madara died of old age, he secretly took the Geto Mazo away. Anyway, collecting the bijou will be a matter of more than 10 years later. During this period, the Geto Mazo will be mine for the time being. Dustless's eyes lit up, and he thought secretly. He really didn't care about Uzumaki Nagato's dojutsu. Stop for me. At this moment, a cold voice sounded in his ears. Dustless was slightly stunned, and turned his head. It was Otsutsuki Iruo, who was looking at him with a cold face. Seeing this, Dustless's face immediately filled with disdain. Otsutsuki is completely finished. Are you still going to hold on to me? Also your Tensigen, including yourself, are just my trophies. Raising his eyebrows slightly, Wuchen spoke frankly, not caring about Otsutsuki Yuro's power. At the same time, he deliberately looked at Otsutsuki Yuro, with a wolfish light in his eyes, sweeping unscrupulously. You, looking at Dustless's eyes, was looking at him aggressively. Otsutsuki's face suddenly turned pale, and his breathing became Abed, and the snow-capped peaks in front of him, swaying, and swaying in a thrilling arc. How about making a deal? Completely suppressing the anger in his heart, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's eyes were filled with determination and reason. He looked at Wuchen and said calmly, "Deal ridiculous." Hearing this, Dustless directly sneered, and his tone changed sharply. "I have already said that your Otsutsuki clan, including you, is the object of my capture. You are not qualified to talk about conditions with me, let alone make a deal." Dustless didn't hide the sarcasm in his tone. Otsutsuki Iruo was already a fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered, a fish on the chopping board, and she had no ability to resist him. Even if he forcibly took the Tensigen, she couldn't do anything. The loser is not qualified to talk about conditions. Your purpose is just the Tensigen. With a slight frown, Otsutsuki Haguro said calmly, "Wuchen came all the way from the earth. It must be for the Tensigen. This is undeniable. What do you want to say?" Slightly stunned, Dustless looked at the indifferent Otsutsuki Iruo in surprise. Seeing that the latter's eyes were as clear as water, and not afraid of his gaze, a wrinkle flashed across his brows. He always felt that Otsutsuki Iruo's words just now contained a different meaning. "You are not a member of the Otsutsuki clan. Even if I transfer my Tensigen to you, you can't use all your strength, and without the Otsutsuki bloodline, the power of the Tensigen will be consumed several times more." Otsutsuki's Yuluo spoke with fervor and assurance. There was a hint of joy in his tone, as if he was sure that he could eat Wuchen. His eyes stared at Wuchen with a strange and unnatural look. But after thinking about Otsutsuki's current situation, the unnatural look in his eyes quickly turned into determination. Although this little girl is a bit exaggerated, this is the truth. Dustless lowered his head and thought. As Otsutsuki Iruo said, Uzumaki Nagato consumed a lot of energy, because he couldn't completely control the Rinnegan. Because the Rinnegan wasn't originally Uzumaki Nagato's, it was extremely exhausting to control it, and it also consumed a lot of chakra. I have the ability to let you perfectly obtain the Otsutsuki bloodline. This is my bargaining chip with you. Otsutsuki Iruo seemed to see Dustless's heart moved, and said confidently, without any worry, "As long as Dustless wants to obtain the Tensigen, he will definitely agree. Let's hear it. What are your conditions?" Dustless didn't directly refuse Otsutsuki Iruo, but instead asked with interest. He wanted to see what the conditions of this big-breasted brainless woman were. "My condition is to marry me." Otsutsuki Iruo's pretty face showed embarrassment, but then she gritted her teeth and said it. Her eyes were full of determination. This was also the result of her careful consideration. Now that the Otsutsuki family has been completely destroyed by the branch family, she is the only one left in the whole family. If she wants to continue the family, she will naturally choose an excellent spouse. Although Dustless has something to do with the destruction of the Otsutsuki family, in the end, it was the branch family that destroyed it. Although Otsutsuki Iruo is unhappy with Dustless, there is no other way, and there is only one Dustless on the moon. And to some extent, Dustless and Otsutsuki Iruo are indeed a match made in heaven. The two families have the same noble bloodline, and the future generations will naturally be dragons and phoenixes. However, Dustless's next sentence directly made her vomit blood. You want to eat the cradle?" Chapter 95. Otsutsuki Hagura's idea was naturally very simple, and not as complicated as Dustless. She simply wanted to breed excellent offspring with Dustless, so that the Otsutsuki bloodline wouldn't be interrupted and extinct. Therefore, she chose Dustless, the only dark horse, and nothing else was important to her. Moreover, the Geto Mazo and the man in front of her were inextricably linked. Maybe she could follow the vine to find the melon, and by the way, inquire about the whereabouts of the Geto Mazo and retrieve it. Otsutsuki Hagura didn't expect Dustless to be so insensible. Her beautiful forehead was full of blue veins. What made her want to vomit blood the most was that he was an old cow eating young grass. You have to agree even if you don't want to, otherwise, don't even think about getting the Otsutsuki bloodline. Suppressing the urge to bite Dustless to death in her heart, Otsutsuki Hagura took a deep breath and tried to stabilize her emotions, and then said in a deep voice, "The Otsutsuki bloodline is not an ordinary bloodline. I know what you are thinking. You want nothing more than to use the huge vitality to cultivate the Otsutsuki bloodline. I'm sorry, that's impossible. Otsutsuki Hagura's voice was resolute and unusually confident. She looked straight at Dustless, and her Tensigen was full of disdain and contempt. You know the role of the Geto Mazo? Dustless looked at the heroic Otsutsuki Hagura with a puzzled expression. His handsome face was full of surprise, and his lips squirmed. However, he seemed to think of something, and the words that were about to come out of his mouth were taken back. He secretly scolded himself for being stupid. How could the Otsutsuki clan, who had guarded the Geto Mazo for thousands of years, not understand the role of the Geto Mazo? The Otsutsuki clan probably knew the role and ability of the Geto Mazo better than anyone else. Why is it impossible? Dustless looked at the serious Otsutsuki Hagura with a puzzled expression. Uchiha Madara could use a piece of meat to cultivate a large number of Hashirama's cells. So why can't he cultivate Otsutsuki's cells? I'm not saying that the Geto Mazo can't cultivate Otsutsuki's body cells. But I can tell you that you don't want to use the Geto Mazo to integrate Otsutsuki's blood. Otsutsuki Haguro faintly glanced at Dustless and said with certainty. His pupils looked at Dustless without any evasion. He looked normal and natural, without any hint of deceit. This woman doesn't seem to be lying. The eyes are the window to the human soul. Dustless's sight has been locked on Otsutsuki's pupils. There was no movement, no evasiveness. It was as calm as a stagnant well without ripples. That's true. It's not like you can obtain the other party's abilities just by fusing with the other party's cells. Thinking of some unknown past, Dustless nodded secretly. This kind of problem related to genes, Dustless is really not good at. But one thing is certain, this is not an absolute problem. For example, Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito fused with Hashirama's cells, provided by the Geto Mazo and obtained Mokutan. But Dustless also fused with Hashirama's cells. Except for feeling the power of nature, there is no such thing as Mokutan. Anyway, I won't lose anything. Looking at Otsutsuki Hagura's voluptuous figure, Dustless nodded secretly. Although he can be 100% sure that this woman has some unknown conspiracy, in short, Dustless has no reason to refuse. Especially after completely obtaining Otsutsuki's bloodline and opening the perfect Tensigen, Dustless has no reason to persuade himself not to accept Otsutsuki Hagura's conditions. In that case, I will reluctantly promise you, but I advise you not to do anything stupid, otherwise, even if I can't get the Tensigen and Otsutsuki's bloodline, I will destroy you. Dustless warned as the scarlet Mangekyo rotated and emitted an extremely dangerous light. As the saying goes, there is nothing wrong with being careful. In fact, Dustless has been prepared for this for a long time. When he obtained Hashirama's cells, Dustless used the transcription seal in advance to implant Izanagi in his left eye, setting it to be activated once he dies, which is equivalent to having a second life. Reluctantly promise me? Hearing this, the corners of Otsutsuki Haruo's mouth twitched fiercely, and his head was full of black lines. He resisted the strong impulse to beat Wu Qin violently in his heart. He gritted his teeth and said, "At least you know your place. How are you going to let me get the Otsutsuki's bloodline?" Ignoring Otsutsuki Hagura's anger, Dustless smiled faintly, and then asked curiously. To be honest, he didn't think Otsutsuki Hagura had any means to do this kind of thing. Of course, through the Tensigen. Otsutsuki Hagura naturally saw Dustless's disapproving eyes. So he said confidently, "Don't forget, the Tensigen and Rinnegan are known as the eyes that can create and destroy the world. What you have seen before is the power of the Tensigen to destroy the world. I have never used the power of the Tensigen to create the world." The power of creation? Hearing this, Dustless was taken aback at first, and there was a brief blank in his mind, and then he nodded mechanically. What he understood before, and even now, was the Tensigen as the side of destroying everything. The so-called ability to create the world. He really hasn't seen it, let alone understand it. Indeed, looking at Dustless's sluggish face, Otsutsuki Hagura obviously didn't think of the ability of the Tensigen in this aspect, and the corner of his mouth raised a smug smile. Both the Tensigen and Rinnegan are known as the dojutsu that can create and destroy the world. But they can create the world. Some of their abilities are absolutely incredible. This is my negligence. Dustless nodded slightly. He really didn't remember this. He only thought about the power of the Tensigen to destroy the world. And the preconceived idea of the Tensigen deceived Dustless's thoughts. I'm afraid the so-called power of creation is definitely not inferior to the Rinnegan ninjutsu. Looking at Otsutsuki Hagura expectantly, Dustless suddenly concluded in his heart, because Otsutsuki Hagura had no reason to lie to him. Chapter 96. The power of the Tensigen is beyond doubt. It can easily split the moon into two halves with a single blow, but this is the world destruction aspect. The ability to create a world. Dustless has never seen it before. Time flies, and 3 days have passed without him noticing. In the old secret room with filthy lights, the walls are old and decayed, revealing endless desolation. There are many murals left from ancient times on it, giving a feeling of mystery and strangeness. What is this place used for? It always feels weird. Looking at the strange environment with a slightly curious gaze, Dustless shrugged uncomfortably and muttered quite uncomfortably. At the same time, his eyes were full of vigilance and vigilance. The reason is that the environment in front of him is really strange. Looking up at the murals above the wall, although they have been decayed for countless years, the young and handsome face can still be clearly seen. His youthful and handsome appearance was as sharp as a knife, and his expression was meticulous. Even though it was just a mere mural, it was filled with a dignified sense of oppression and might without being angry. What attracted Dustless's attention the most is that the handsome young man. There are clearly protruding hard objects similar to horns on both sides of his forehead, and there are strange black pearls floating behind him. This is the mural of Otsutsuki Hamura. After staring at the figure on the mural above his head for a while, Dustless said in surprise. At the same time, he secretly sighed at the man who can be compared to the legendary Six Paths Sannin. Almost all the murals in this mysterious secret room have been decayed by time. Only the mural of Otsutsuki Hamura seems to be full of endless magic, resisting the erosion of time. Even after thousands of years, it's still extraordinarily clear and well-defined. You are still afraid. Otsutsuki Hamura is naturally not a mortal, although the unnaturalness in Dustless's eyes disappeared in a flash. She also noticed it, and immediately teased him. The feeling that Dustless has always given her has always been the kind of person who is not afraid of anything, and is extremely arrogant. There is always someone better. I never thought that I was invincible. Compared with the ancestor of the moon, Otsutsuki Hamura, there is still a gap between us. Ignoring Otsutsuki Hamura's teasing, Dustless said calmly. Not to mention that he hasn't obtained the Tensigen yet. Even if he does obtain the Tensigen, Dustless doesn't feel that he is the opponent of Otsutsuki Hamura. After all, Otsutsuki Hamura is also the direct descendant of Otsutsuki Kagaya, the ancestor of chakra. But then again, at this moment Dustless's expression, Otsutsuki Hamura, and Otsutsuki Hamura's, Dustless and Otsutsuki Hamura was standing beside him. Raising his head and looking into Otsutsuki's eyes, Wu Chen's face was even more unnatural. Is there any doubt? Seeing Dustless looking at her in confusion and unnaturalness, Otsutsuki Hamura didn't think much about it, but asked bluntly, being on the moon, she doesn't have the complicated thoughts of human beings on the earth. She just simply says what she wants to say. It's okay. I'm just not used to this kind of scene. With the corners of his mouth twitching slightly, Dustless immediately retracted his gaze, closed his eyes gently, and shook his head lightly. This scene is like a patient about to undergo an operation. The patient is naturally Dustless himself, and the attending doctor is Otsutsuki Hamura. So Dustless can't help but think of the tragic scene of the white mouse being experimented on. In that case, I'll start. Otsutsuki Hamura nodded her white chin and looked at Dustless's strong and flat chest. Her pretty face was slightly red, and her eyes swept towards Dustless's face subconsciously. He doesn't look like a bad person. Listening to Wu Chen's steady breathing, Wu Chen seemed to be asleep without any vigilance. His expression was lazy, like a sleepy baby, which made Otsutsuki slightly stunned. For the first time, he felt that this was Wu Chen's true face. Seeing this, Otsutsuki Hamura also calmed down, and the hesitation in her eyes disappeared. She put her white hand on Dustless's chest, and the green light was generous, rendering the entire space. The flowing light was generous, and Otsutsuki Hamura's arm seemed to be transparent red in an instant. Dark red blood spots constantly gushed out from her body, like the light of fireflies, constantly passing through her hand on Dustless's chest and into Dustless's body. What a strange feeling! Feeling the special blood that he had never had before integrated into his body, Dustless was slightly stunned. He felt the ancient power from Otsutsuki Hamura awakening and modifying the blood in his body. Opening his sleepy eyelids, Dustless slightly squinted, revealing a faint light. Looking at Otsutsuki Hamura, who was sweating because of changing his physique, Dustless's heart, which had been covered in dust for many years, gently loosened, and some strange warmth crossed his cold heart. It seems that she is serious. Closing his eyes again, Dustless's heart was complicated. Originally, Otsutsuki Hamura deliberately approached her and wanted to find an opportunity to ask about the whereabouts of Geto Mazo, and then find an opportunity to kill him. Now it seems that Dustless thought too much. Let nature take its course. Sighing in his heart, Dustless no longer worried about these trivial things, and couldn't help but sigh at the twists and turns of fate. He also knew that this kind of thing can't be forced. Abandoning the complicated emotions, Dustless carefully felt the changes in his body, and not wasting Otsutsuki Hamura's painstaking efforts, he cooperated with her. Time continued to pass. Dustless could clearly feel the changes in his body, and he could clearly perceive that Otsutsuki Hamura's bloodline and the Uchiha blood flowing in his body were slowly merging. In a fundamental sense, the Uchiha also belonged to the Otsutsuki bloodline, but after thousands of years of reproduction, the bloodline has long been different, and in the initial stage of the fusion, there were indeed signs of mutual rejection between the bloodlines. But with the use of a special power by Otsutsuki Hamura, the rejection between the bloodlines suddenly decreased to the extreme and slowly merged. It should be the power of the Tensigen. With a flash of light in his heart, Dustless realized that only a large use of the power of the Tensigen can make Otsutsuki Hamura sweat like this. Chapter 97. At the same time, Wu Chen's pupils were also filled with intense pain. It was like being pricked by needles. Wu Chen could clearly feel that an extremely violent power filled his eyes, as if it was going to tear his eyeballs apart. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Moreover, his pupils seemed to be bursting out of his eyes. A never-before-experienced itchiness spread out. This extremely terrifying eye power, it can't be wrong. Feeling the strange situation in his right eye, Dustless suddenly gasped. The terrifying eye power was far more powerful than Mangekyo, and even because of the excessive eye power, there was a feeling of uncontrollable. But what puzzled him was that only the eye power in his right eye went berserk, and there was no difference in his left eye. It's really strange. Feeling that his left eye was as calm as stagnant water, and there was no change, Dustless was full of doubts and puzzlement, because a few days ago, Otsutsuki Hagura had implanted high-purity Byakugan power in Dustless's eyes in advance. His right eye was violent like thunder, and his left eye was as quiet as stagnant water. Before that, Otsutsuki Hagura had implanted the power of Byakugan into Dustless's left and right eyes. How do you feel? You already have the same Otsutsuki bloodline as me. Wiping the beads of sweat from her temples, Otsutsuki Hagura's kind eyes were unusually dim at the moment, and her irregular Tensigen was very gray. Obviously, she spent a lot of energy, and was mentally and physically exhausted. There were even some inconspicuous wrinkles in the corners of her eyes, which showed that this was also a jutsu that consumed vitality. This feeling is very good. Grabbing the dizzy Otsutsuki Hagura, Dustless looked at the wrinkles in the corners of her eyes, and his heart was complicated. Immediately, Under Otsutsuki Hagura's surprised gaze, Dustless's thumb suddenly touched her eyebrows, emitting a bright and warm golden light. The golden light suddenly poured into Otsutsuki Hagura's mind, and the wrinkles on both sides of her eyes disappeared. You can't really control light, right? Feeling the warmth in her body that hadn't disappeared, Otsutsuki Hagura's eyes suddenly lit up, looking at Dustless in disbelief, and her tone was full of endless surprise. Barely covering his right eye, Dustless smiled faintly and gave an ambiguous answer. Although he had eaten the glint fruit and possessed most of the power of light, there was still a long way to go before he could become like sunlight. Freak. Otsutsuki Hagoromo shook his head, and his eyes flashed with frivolity. He didn't care about Dustless's answer, and immediately looked at Dustless covering his right eye and asked expectantly, "Is the Tensigen?" Looking nervously at Dustless, Otsutsuki Dustless was also her first attending patient. As a doctor, she naturally didn't want Dustless to fail in his evolution. Although the method is a bit rough, but, looking at Otsutsuki Hagoromo angrily, Dustless's left eye rolled back. Thinking of the previous heart-wrenching pain, he couldn't help but feel cold all over. Immediately, under the latter's hopeful gaze, he slowly removed the hand covering his right eye. The blue eyeball was clearly visible, and the irregular circles inside were clearly visible. It looked not much different from the eyes of ordinary humans. Compared with the Sharingan, which gives people a feeling of evil and darkness, this blue eye undoubtedly gives people a feeling of sunshine. It's the Tensigen. The only difference is that Dustless only has one Tensigen, and it's the right eye that caused a strong vibration. That's not right. Looking at the Tensigen in Dustless's right eye, Otsutsuki Hagoromo screamed, because Dustless's left eye is the Manjikyu Sharingan. You have high-purity Byakugan implanted in both eyes. Why only the right eye has the Tensigen? Looking at Dustless with doubt and hesitation, Otsutsuki Hagoromo was puzzled. God knows. Dustless shrugged, feeling the powerful eye power in his right eye slightly stunned. It's much stronger than the Manjikyu Sharingan. Although it's only the power of one eye, Dustless didn't feel any discomfort. You failure. Looking at Dustless's face full of joy and intoxicated by the power of the Tensigen, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's red lips slightly pouted, showing dissatisfaction, and yelled at Dustless with extreme annoyance. However, this guy is really strange. Judging from the degree of pupil power of his eye, it's already comparable to my two reincarnated eyes. Feeling the powerful eye power of the Tensigen in Dustless's right eye, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's heart was overwhelmed with horror. With only one eye's eye power, Dustless's Tensigen is on par with her eyes. If Dustless can open the Tensigen in both eyes, then it will be terrible. Although the Uchiha and the Otsutsuki clan have a relationship, thousands of years have passed, and the two clans have nothing to do with each other. Maybe the Otsutsuki bloodline you implanted in me can only support one Tensigen. After pondering for a while, Dustless explained, after all, he is not a member of the Otsutsuki clan, and the power of one eye is comparable to Hagoromo's eyes. He is already satisfied. That's true. On second thought, although he was dissatisfied with the failure of Dustless, Hagoromo was quickly relieved. After all, Dustless is not a member of the Otsutsuki clan. It's already good that he can open the Tensigen that only Otsutsuki can open, even if it's just one eye. Looking at Dustless, at this moment, the difference between Dustless's eyes is particularly big. The right eye is the Tensigen, which gives a feeling of sunshine, and the left eye is the Manjikyu Sharingan, which gives a feeling of extreme evil. In short, it looks extremely contradictory. It's good to find a partner to practice the Tensigen. Feeling the powerful eye power in his right eye, Dustless's eyes burst with a strong fighting spirit, and the target of this practice is naturally the system Ling. However, Dustless is not in a hurry to find Ling, to practice. Before that, he must master the ability and moves of the Tensigen. Looking at the Otsutsuki Haruo, Wuchen's mind became active. This daughter-in-law who sent herself to his door is an expert in Tensigen, far better than him, a rookie. It's not a bad idea to learn from her and cultivate their relationship. Chapter 98. Time flies unknowingly. Another 7 days pass quickly. Dustless has been on the moon for half a month. Although there are only 2 people on the moon, Dustless and Otsutsuki Hagoromo. As for Otsutsuki Hagoromo, she has been torn to pieces by Otsutsuki Hagoromo, who hates her to the extreme. The moon of the 2 is quite like a world of 2 people. But Dustless has been either practicing the ability of Tensigen, or referring to some ancient ninjutsu left by the Otsutsuki family. It's worthy of being a clan that has been around since ancient times. It's really extraordinary. Looking at the wooden handbook in his hand, Dustless nodded in admiration. The content of it is naturally the unique insights of the ancestors of the Otsutsuki family on ninjutsu, and Dustless benefited a lot from it. The ancestors of the Otsutsuki family are the ancestors of chakra, and the use of chakra is naturally not something that you humans on Earth can understand. Otsutsuki Hagoromo glanced at Dustless with contempt in his eyes, and said seriously, "That's true." With a smile, Dustless can't deny that this is indeed an indisputable fact. The heritage of the Otsutsuki family is really terrible. When are you going to leave the moon? Her beautiful eyes looked at Wu Chen. After a few days of training, although Wu Chen's right Tensigen had not been completely used freely, and although some extreme moves could not be controlled, at least he could shrink it freely and switch it at will. Well, it should be soon. Looking at the blue planet in the distance, Dustless said calmly, as if talking to himself. His mind fell into an empty space, and immediately stared at the distant planet with a deep and unusual gaze. His whole body was full of cold air. Hearing this, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's voice sank, looking at Dustless with a complicated expression, and whispered softly, "People like you are really the source of chaos in the world." Looking at Dustless with resentment and dissatisfaction, Otsutsuki Hagoromo was not surprised at all. It was precisely because Dustless chose to pursue supreme power that he came to a desolate place like the moon. There's nothing wrong with pursuing power, just like your Otsutsuki family has been in decline for thousands of years, but you still can't escape the fate of destruction. If you have the power to absolutely crush Otsutsuki Yumi and his Tensigen weapon, your family won't perish. In fact, all living creatures are the same. Once they are immersed in the so-called peace, they will stop evolving and become satisfied with the current situation. Their hearts will also sink because of this, and they will yearn for the false peace. The world created by the Sage of the 6 Realms is a false simulation, an unreal world. Dustless said calmly, ignoring Otsutsuki Ulua, whose face was getting uglier and uglier. It is because some people have such evil thoughts that the world is out of balance. You are the biggest destroyer of balance. Looking at Dustless angrily, Otsutsuki Ulua said with anger in his words, and he couldn't wait to beat up Dustless. As you said, it is because the power is too concentrated that the world is out of balance. But have you ever thought about why those who choose to concentrate power want to change the world? That's because the world is wrong. Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Ulua with a crazy idea in his heart. If he can fool this woman to be a thug on the earth, that would be great. The reason why Madara chose to steal the Geto Mazo was because the world was completely desperate, and he chose to create a perfect world in the way of Genjutsu. Putting aside his standpoint, Dustless actually agreed with this approach. People can't completely understand each other, and there is no strong bridge to communicate with people's hearts. Uchiha Madara's temperament changed greatly, so he used the power of the Jubi to release the infinite Tsukuyomi to the world. It's not like you don't know everything that has happened on the earth for thousands of years. I don't need to say this. Dustless just smiled faintly. Facts speak louder than words, and the current situation of the earth explains everything. Hearing this, Otsutsuki Ulua was silent, and he didn't need Dustless to say more. Why don't you come to the earth with me? Anyway, the Geto Mazo is gone, and the Otsutsuki clan is gone, and your duty is over. Seeing Otsutsuki Ulua's heart wavering, Dustless took advantage of the opportunity to strike. You want me to live on the moon for the rest of my life? Don't even think about it. You spent so much time talking just to pull me to the earth to subvert the world with you. Seeing through Dustless's plot, Otsutsuki Ulua sneered with contempt, and it was obvious that he was too stupid and naive. With the corners of his mouth twitching fiercely, Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Yulua with a red face and trembled with anger. He rolled his eyes and said, "I'm telling the truth. Is it useful if I don't agree?" Staring at Dustless, Otsutsuki Yulua said sullenly, "Even if she doesn't agree, Dustless will choose to take her away by force. It's good that you can think like this." Dustless didn't deny it, because he did intend to do so. In the blue world, countless rays of light decorated the surrounding space, and the air was extraordinarily fresh, close to nature, like a paradise on earth, beautiful beyond compare. "This is the world of the system." Wu Chen looked coldly at the devastatingly beautiful girl with light makeup, and no makeup in the distance. He said coldly, "I might as well tell you, Ling, I'm here to make trouble for you today." After saying that, Dustless's eyes suddenly changed. His right eye turned into the Tensigen, and his left eye turned into the Scarlet Mangekyo Sharingan. Regardless of whether Ling agreed or not, chakra gushed out of his body, and the Tensigen surged with an unusually dangerous light. His whole personality was dangerous, especially the hurricane sweeping out from his hand, which was extremely cold. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. The incomparably strong tornado suddenly roared towards Linger. The high-speed hurricane could crush all things in the world. Not to mention touching it, even if she was more than 100 feet away, she would feel a tingling sensation on her skin. Chapter 99. The giant tornado roared, and the strong hurricane swallowed the flowing air around it, like a black hole in the deep sea, constantly enlarging and increasing the scope of destruction. As it approached Linger, it became a behemoth of hundreds of meters long, sweeping the sky, rolling up endless cold wind, and the piercing air waves scattered in all directions. "It's useless." Ling faintly looked at the hurricane rushing towards her, and gently raised her hand, and her eyes suddenly changed. Under the surprised gaze of Dustless, her eyes suddenly turned purple, and a circle of black ripples surged out of her eyes. Her whole body also changed dramatically. Looking up, Linger, who originally had light makeup and no makeup, also became Uchiha Madara with a cold temperament and a domineering face. "This is interesting." Looking at Linger Uchiha Madara, Dustless was slightly stunned. He still clearly remembered that Ling easily crushed him in the state of the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Now it turned into the Rinnegan. In other words, it was also a recognition of Dustless's strength. "Not to mention harming me. This sort of attack is unable to even touch me." Linger, who turned into Uchiha Madara, faintly stared at the tornado that wanted to crush him, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly, raising a contemptuous smile. Not only the appearance, but even the momentum was very similar to Uchiha Madara, looking at all living beings with contempt. The Rinnegan was slightly narrowed, staring at the huge tornado roaring. The pupils of Uchiha Madara suddenly widened, exuding strong fluctuations, and then the corner of his mouth swept a strange smile, and his hands were in front of him. So indifferently, he let the tornado swallow him. Boom! However, strangely, the moment the giant tornado touched the inside of Uchiha Madara, a powerful repulsive force suddenly spread out from the inside of the tornado, and directly collapsed. The powerful tornado was instantly smashed into dust. This is undoubtedly a repulsive force, but, seeing this, Dustless slightly frowned, and began to think in his mind. The main manifestation of the repulsive force of the Rinnegan is the aspect of Shinra Tensei, but the repulsive force of Shinra Tensei is centered on the body. This move is obviously different, just like Amaterasu. The place where the eyes focus immediately turns into a fire. Uchiha Madara doesn't seem to have this move. After pondering for a while, Dustless's frown deepened, and he could faintly see the Chuan character condensed between his eyebrows, and subconsciously looked up at Ling's Uchiha Madara, with a puzzled face. Madara's face was full of mysteries. No, Wu Chen's body was cold. He suddenly remembered the signature ninjutsu of Uchiha Madara, after he opened the Rinnegan. His heart was extremely cold. At the same time, He felt that he was caught by the dangerous and sharp eyes of a falcon. Tomb, border prison. Boom. At the place where Dustless stood, a super strong repulsive wave suddenly burst out. It swept across the sky like the autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves. In an instant, it spread to every corner of the sky. Everything that came in contact with it turned into ashes. It's a pity that I'm a step late, or that kid will be seriously injured. Seeing Dustless use elementalization to escape the attack of Tomb, border prison, the purple Rinnegan suddenly surged with waves of ripples, and a look of disappointment flashed across his face. Maybe it was only a second late. Dustless was seriously injured and fell to the ground. What a dangerous technique. Dustless, who escaped the attack of Tomb of Reincarnation, immediately pulled a distance away from Ling Er's Uchiha Madara. Looking at Madara with his hands in front of him, his heart twitched fiercely. Although this Uchiha Madara in front of him was transformed by Ling Er, there was no difference in strength between him and the Uchiha Madara in the real world. Sure enough, it's the dangerous technique of Tomb of Reincarnation. It's really dangerous. Dustless took a deep breath, and at the same time, his hair stood up, and he looked at Uchiha Madara with vigilance. His spirit was tense, and he didn't dare to have any carelessness. Tomb of Reincarnation, this technique is almost invincible. Even if you know the principle, you can't completely guard against it. Just like Dustless, if he didn't have the ability to elementalize, I'm afraid he would have been eliminated. It's a pity that I don't have the Rinnegan, nor the six-path Senjutsu. He couldn't help but sweat for himself. Dustless was speechless. There were only these two things that could deal with Luan Tomb, border prison. And he didn't have any of these two. Although the ability of elemental transformation could also ignore physical attacks. But unless he was in the state of elemental transformation, he could only passively take a beating. Super Shinra Tensei. Before Dustless recovered, a strong hurricane came head-on, and compared to the power and range of Tomb of Reincarnation, border prison, it was no worse. It's useless. Dustless looked at the wave of wind, and he chuckled, and turned into a golden light that went straight toward Madara. Super Shinra Tensei naturally passed through Dustless's body, and couldn't cause any damage. You think you're invincible in elementalization? Well, today I'll let you understand that in the face of absolute power, any ability is futile. Madara sneered, and at the same time, a high-density black chakra appeared in his hand and floated to the sky. Chibaku Tensei, are you kidding me? How can I let you succeed? Looking at the black ball floating in the sky, Dustless's Mangekyo Sharingan suddenly distorted violently, and after aiming at the black ball, he suddenly screamed, Amaterasu! Boom! The black high-density chakra ball suddenly burst, and the sky trembled violently, and the harsh explosion made people dizzy and deaf. Good opportunity. Tomb of Reincarnation, border prison. Boom! Attacked by the Tomb of Reincarnation, Dustless's upper body was instantly amputated, leaving only a pair of legs and feet. But in the next second, they were restored again. Obviously, Dustless was prepared in advance. Chapter 100. Seeing that Dustless's elementalization was ineffective against his attack, Madara couldn't help but frown. To be honest, this tricky ability is quite a headache. If I want to defeat this kid, I can only use some unusual means. The Rinnegan surged with a burst of cold light, and Madara's chakra burst out of his body, and the dark blue chakra quickly compressed and formed. Kinsusanu. As Madara's voice fell, layers of dense chakra extended rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, a huge chakra energy body with Tengu armor was completely formed. It was Madara's ultimate body Kinsusanu. The feeling of ancient vicissitudes floated out of the giant's body, as if silently telling that in front of the ultimate body Kinsusanu, all things in the world are not worth mentioning. Well, the ultimate body Kinsusanu. For me now, this technique is just full of flaws. The corner of his mouth raised a contemptuous smile. Looking at the ultimate body Kinsusanu that almost covered the sky, Dustless had no fear, And not only that, his face was full of disdain. The Tensigan jumped sharply, and the golden light suddenly cut through the sky, extending infinitely, and instantly formed an extremely slender light sword. The chakra light sword that wanted to split the entire system world was extremely powerful. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Whoosh! The long, narrow, and wide golden light sword swept over, revealing its sharpness. The area covered by the sword seemed to have no end, and it was about to split the entire world apart. I can't stop it. Seeing the long and narrow golden lightsaber whistling towards them, Madara, who was transformed by Ling, was shocked, and a rare look of panic appeared in his eyes. Bastard! The Rinnegan surged with cold light, and Madara suddenly roared. Although the ultimate body Susanoo has infinite power and can destroy the world, its speed is its biggest weakness. In the face of the sweeping golden light sword, it can only passively take a beating. Poochie! The long and narrow golden light passed through the waist of the ultimate body Susanoo. Looking up, Susanoo's waist was dotted with a faint golden light. The giant that covered the sky suddenly collapsed and turned into two parts. Looking up, it was Susanoo that was cut in half by Dustless. Good boy, your strength has really improved. Madara's face was extremely ugly. Since the ultimate body Susanoo came out, it was the first time that it was so easily crushed, as fragile as a bug. Wu Chen was abnormally indifferent. His eyes were as calm as an ancient well, without any ripples. Not to mention the ultimate form of Susanoo. Even if the entire world is in front of the Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion, it would be as weak as a thin paper. Looking at the ultimate body Susanoo that was cut in half, Dustless didn't care, and then looked at Madara indifferently. After all, the Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion can even split the moon in two, let alone the ultimate body Susanoo. It's a good eye. Staring at the Tensigan in Dustless's right eye, the system Ling, transformed into Uchiha Madara praised, and then his eyes suddenly became cold, and Susanoo appeared again. The only difference is that the two Susanoo were facing the sky, forming hand seals with Madara, and the Rinnegan was emitting extremely powerful eye power. Tensigan Earthquake Star. As Madara's voice fell, the sky suddenly darkened, and the dark shadow covered the light. Looking up, he saw an unprecedented giant meteorite with a diameter of 15 kilometers falling from the sky. Looking up slightly, Dustless looked at the meteorite that slowed down, and his brows wrinkled unconsciously. What is this guy's intention? Looking at Ling, transformed into Madara, Dustless's eyes were full of doubts. There is no doubt that the scale of the Tensigan Earthquake Star is terrifying, but it also varies from person to person. This kind of ninjutsu has no effect on Dustless at all. Obviously, there is an unspeakable purpose. In the world of ninjas, strength is important, but sometimes IQ can also change the situation. But since you're here, I'll take it one by one. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. The high-speed rotating hurricane raged out, and the airwaves were as cold as a blade. Due to Dustless's continuous transmission of chakra, the giant tornado continued to expand and extend. The momentum was extremely fierce, and the area covered was almost impossible to estimate. Then he flew straight towards the falling meteorite. Boom, boom, boom. At the center of the meteorite, which had a diameter of 15 kilometers, a huge pit was immediately drilled out. The extraordinarily powerful hurricane continued to expand madly towards the interior of the meteorite. Huge crushed rocks were constantly falling from the sky. It was as if the sky was raining meteorites, which was particularly spectacular. The meteorite rain became more and more intense until finally, the clouds were cleared, and the sky was completely restored. I said, although this kind of technique is extremely challenging to the visual nerves, but, suddenly looking up, a giant black high-density chakra ball roared, and Dustless's voice stopped abruptly. That black ball was the Bijidama. Looking at the oncoming giant black Bijidama, Dustless's mouth twitched fiercely, and looking up, he could see the nine-tailed orange monster. This is the world inside the system, and Madara is also transformed by Ling, not to mention the Bijidama. I'm afraid that even the Ghetto Mazo can be created. With a pale face, Dustless realized that the world inside the system had nothing to do with the outside world, and Madara's peak strength was preserved. After feeling the destructive power of the Kyuubi's Bijidama, Dustless didn't have any intention of retreating. Instead, a green chakra floated all over his body. It was the Tensigen chakra mode. In this state, Dustless can easily use the truth-seeking ball, similar to the Kyuubi's chakra mode of Naruto and Zito, which is characterized by the green chakra covering the whole body. In this mode, he can use beads similar to the truth-seeking ball to attack and defend. The Kyuubi's Bijidama is powerful, but there's no need to run. Chapter 101. The giant Bijidama rushing towards Madara seemed to destroy the world, and the black energy ball seemed to come from the underworld. It was untouchable, and even the airwaves flowing in the air made a detour. What a strange pattern! Madara, who was transformed by Ling, looked at Dustless, who was wrapped in the green chakra pattern, and for a while he didn't recover, and his face was full of curiosity, especially the Tensigen in Dustless's right eye, which made him particularly curious. An eye comparable to the Rinnegan, this is really beyond his scope of knowledge. The world is so big, nothing is too strange. Madara smiled faintly, looking at Dustless. The contempt in his eyes finally disappeared, and was replaced with unprecedented caution. Although Dustless only has one Tensigen, the move that cut the ultimate body in half in an instant shows that he has the ability to threaten Madara. This kid is really not ordinary. The Rinnegan surged with endless cold light, looking at Dustless, who didn't dodge the Kyuubi's Bijidama. Madara's eyes flashed with curiosity. He could feel that the green beads floating around Dustless were extraordinary. It seems similar to the truth-seeking ball. After staring for a while, Madara's face showed a flash of understanding. Boom, boom, boom. At the moment of contact with Dustless, the Bijidama suddenly burst, setting off a strong shock wave, and the destructive airwaves pressed down on Dustless's survival space. The green light on his body instantly formed a semicircular space wrapped around Dustless, allowing Dustless to safely escape the destruction of the Bijidama. The Kyuubi is the strongest among the Bijou, and there is no doubt about his strength. If it weren't for the Sharingan being the natural enemy of the Bijou, I'm afraid not many people would dare to confront him head-on. Insignificant skill. Dustless, who was inside the defensive barrier, felt the impact of the Bijou's explosion, and constantly crushed the barrier formed by the green beads. But he just shook his head indifferently, without the slightest worry. From beginning to end, he had maintained an unprecedented calmness. After a long while, the violent explosion stopped completely. Dustless was about to remove the defensive barrier, when the ground in front of him suddenly shook violently. It was as if there was an earthquake, and the tremors didn't stop. Removing the defense, he suddenly saw the Kyuubi rushing over. Madara stood on top of his head indifferently. It was obvious that the Kyuubi's eyes had turned scarlet. A mere 9 tails is nothing. Do you think I can't do anything to 9 tails? Stupid. Looking at the 9-tailed beast's huge body, Dustless sneered. At the same time, a terrifying killing intent flashed across his face. Spirit communication technique. Ayo ayo ayo. A deafening roar burst out. Looking up, it was a huge stone statue summoned by Dustless. Its size was larger than Kyuubi's, and its appearance was fierce. In terms of size and appearance, it was very similar to the old Otsutsuki Hamura. Whoosh! Boom! Seeing the stone statue of Otsutsuki Hamura blocking in front of Wu Chun, Kyuubi shot out a small Bijidama from his mouth, breaking the stone statue into pieces, but in the next second, it was restored again. It can recover. What a strange ability. Uchiha Madara, who was on the Kyuubi's head, frowned slightly as he looked at the tomo on the chest of the statue. He lowered his head, and his eyes were as clear as a mirror. Don't look at everything with an omniscient expression. In fact, there are many things you don't know. The Mangekyo in his left eye flashed with a cold light, and the pupil suddenly enlarged. There were many thin lines in the eyeball like a spider web, and there was a faint black flame. Uchiha Madara, gave people a very uncomfortable feeling. There was no other reason than Uchiha Madara's omniscient eyes made Dustless particularly angry, even if the Uchiha Madara in front of him was just the system's consciousness Ling, Amaterasu. Whoosh! Uchiha Madara, who was on the Kyuubi's head, was suddenly engulfed in black flames. However, Madara didn't seem to feel anything. He let the flames burn his body, but he was still safe and sound. This kind of ordinary ninjutsu is useless to me. Madara shook his head and cast a look of pity and contempt at Dustless, and immediately his whole body was like a black hole, completely absorbing Dustless's Amaterasu. Seeing this, Dustless didn't have any surprise. This is one of the manifestations of the Rinnegan's divine power. The reverse circulation of the chakra in the body and the opponent in front of him. What about this? The golden light roared up, and immediately the golden light bullets fell mercilessly. The number was too dense to estimate. Looking up, one could only see the golden light covering the sky. Senjutsu, Yasakani no Magatama. Unlike the simple Yasakani no Magatama, after the fusion of the Senjutsu chakra, the range of the Yasakani no Magatama was greatly improved. Naive to the extreme, seeing the countless golden light bullets whizzing towards him and nine-tailed, the biting cold of the bullets seemed to want to hit him out of a sieve. At that moment he just smiled indifferently. Tomb of Reincarnation, Border Prison. Boom! At the center of the falling golden light bullets, a shockwave suddenly exploded, destroying all of the light bullets. Of course, there were some that slipped through, but they were still forced to change their trajectories by the repulsive force, and all of them hit the ground around them, turning the surface of the ground into a sieve-like beehive. Uchiha Madara and the Kyuubi he controlled were safe. This is the horror of Tomb of Reincarnation, Border Prison. Not only does it have destructive attack power, but it can also defend, and even destroy any ninjutsu. So far, there are only a few ninjutsu that can defend against the repulsive force. And the most terrible thing about Tomb of Reincarnation is that just like Amaterasu, the focus of the eyes is the target of the attack, and there is no complete defense. Chapter 102. Dustless sighed. The Rinnegan is actually similar to the Mangekyo Sharingan. After opening it, some special jutsu will be born, such as Uchiha Madara's Tomb of Reincarnation Border Prison, and Uchiha Sasuke's Heavenly Hand Power. A jutsu that makes others envious. Seeing that his senjutsu, Yasakani no Magatama, was completely broken, Wu Chun was full of praise. He looked at Madara's Rinnegan with a fiery gaze. He didn't hide the greed in his eyes. Tomb of Reincarnation, Border Prison was an invincible technique. If Wu Chun said that he didn't desire it, it would be pure nonsense. Well done, Ling. Looking at Ling, who turned into Madara, Dustless couldn't help but sigh at the system's defiance. Just like Uzumaki Nagato, who transplanted Madara's Rinnegan, didn't know the existence of some ninjutsu, let alone use it perfectly. I am the god of creation in the system's world, and everything in the world can be changed according to my will. Ling turned into Uchiha Madara and said. His tone was extremely calm, as if he was narrating a trivial matter. His heart was like stagnant water without any ripples. His whole person felt like a rock, without any emotion or emotion, pretending to be a ghost. Hearing this, Dustless just curled his lips. Looking at Madara, who was standing indifferently, Dustless felt even more uncomfortable. He always felt that Madara's tone was arrogant. Looking up slightly, Dustless looked at Madara, who was looking down at him from the top of the Kyuubi's head. His eyes were cold and murderous. He slowly raised his right arm and faced Madara, who was on the Kyuubi's head. Come down. Boom. A strong repulsive force came out of Dustless's palm, crossing layers of space, and swept straight toward Madara. Feeling the repulsive force coming from the front, Madara's face suddenly changed, as if he was hit by a heavy punch, and fell from the Kyuubi's head. Repulsion. Madara, who fell to the ground, stared at Dustless's Tensigen, because his Mangekyo didn't have such an ability. There was no doubt that it was the blue eyes ability that he had never seen before. This is nothing. I'll show you something even more interesting. If you have the guts, use the Tomb of Reincarnation to destroy this technique as well. The corners of Dustless's mouth curled up in a complacent arc. Soon after, his expression suddenly turned cold. The chakra around his body swelled and exploded. He raised his arm high, surrounded by a dazzling golden light. It faintly emitted a terrifying sharpness that could cut through all things. Golden Wheel Reincarnation. As Dustless's voice fell, it was as if the horn of doomsday had been blown. The golden light expanded and extended without limit, and the pitch-black shadow almost covered the entire system world. The world was faintly filled with signs of collapse, and there were signs that it was going to split into two. If you're hit, you'll die. Madara's handsome face was no longer as calm as before. He was unusually gloomy and heavy. This technique can cut the ultimate body can Susanoo like a cabbage. I'm afraid that anyone who gets hit by it will end up in a tragic end. Boom, boom, boom. On the other side, the Kyuubi was also fighting with the stone statue of Otsutsuki Himura. The battle between the two giants naturally shook the earth, and the whole ground shook like thunder. The stone statue of Otsutsuki Himura temporarily had the upper hand. Although it was crushed by the Kyuubi from time to time, as long as Dustless, the owner of the Tensigen, didn't fail, the stone statue of Otsutsuki Himura wouldn't be defeated. It could be restored and restored without limit. It could completely consume the Kyuubi, the largest collection of chakra. Whoosh! Suddenly, the golden lightsaber poured down, and the incomparably sharp blade swallowed Madara in an instant, destroying and annihilating the endless earth. Crack, crack, crack. Unable to bear the unprecedented impact of the huge force, the ground suddenly burst open, and a narrow crack hundreds of kilometers long with almost no end was exposed to the eyes, completely dividing the whole earth into two sides. Oh, it seems that I didn't control it well. If it was Hagoromo, I'm afraid he would have been killed. Shaking his head, Dustless's eyes flashed with disappointment. He could feel that Madara wasn't killed. Although his breath was weak, it was still not enough to send him to the sky. The smoke and dust on the ground combined with the long and narrow crack of hundreds of kilometers was extraordinarily terrifying and full of depression, giving people a sense of despair at the dusk of the end of the world. Yes, that strange eye is really powerful, no worse than the Rinnegan. A cold voice drifted through the heavy smoke, falling into Dustless's ears, but it actually had a different meaning. Looking up slightly, through the endless smoke and dust, he could see the vague outline of a young girl. It was the cold and indifferent face of the system's consciousness, Ling who had restored her own appearance. Her eyes swept past Dustless's body, and Ling immediately nodded. Her tone suddenly raised a little, and whispered, "Today is the first time you defeated a character in the system. Although it's a bit sloppy, it's barely okay." Barely okay? Hearing this, Wu Chen's mouth suddenly twitched. His face suddenly turned black and he rolled his eyes. He said angrily, "If I can reach your ideal realm, even if Otsutsuki Kagaya is resurrected now, she can only watch me surpass her." Wu Chen pretended to be furious and stared at Ling Er. Wu Chen was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. This guy was purely here to attack people. Perhaps if he reached Ling Er's ideal state, not to mention this world in front of him, he was afraid that he would be able to do whatever he wanted in the two dimensions. Forget it. Since you already have the strength to defeat the character I created, I will also let you understand the essence of the system. The tone suddenly changed, and Ling Er said directly, her eyes were faintly full of light, and at the same time, her beautiful eyes turned around Dustless, flashing the same light from time to time. "I should have told you that the essence of the system is plunder, and the meaning is also plunder. You can defeat any character I created. In fact, you can take everything from them." Chapter 103. Dustless actually had a lot of questions about the system in his heart, but he didn't have free time these days. Now that Ling Er said this, he suddenly remembered. That is to say, The system is not so useless. Dustless's eyes were like waking up from a dream. He always thought that the system only had a lottery function, but now it seems that he thought too much. Then, I just defeated Uchiha Madara. Did I get his Rinnegan? Looking at Linger expectantly, Dustless's eyes were full of hope and yearning. If what Linger said is true, he will get everything of Uchiha Madara, including Rinnegan and Mokuton. You didn't kill me completely just now. Blinking her shining eyes, Linger was very ruthless and straightforward to hit Dustless. Her words revealed a rare teasing and ridicule, giving people a feeling of friendliness. That's because you didn't tell me that you were going to kill me, otherwise, how can I tolerate you? The corners of his mouth suddenly twitched, and he almost spat out blood. Wu Chun was so angry that he scolded in his heart. He looked at Linger, who looked indifferent. His resentment index was off the charts. You can't cheat people like this. It's because you never asked. Ignoring Dustless's dissatisfaction directly, Linger didn't hesitate to add fuel to the fire. After seeing Dustless's angry eyes, she whispered, "The facts are not as simple as you think. It's okay to take the opponent's ability, but there is also a limit. If you are defeated by the opponent, you will also pay a heavy price, and this price is your life." Staring at Dustless, who was about to complain, Linger was very serious. Her spotless white face was full of caution, and her tone was a lot more severe. "Does this mean that if I'm defeated, I'll die completely?" Taking a deep breath, Dustless's eyes were a lot ugly. In other words, if he blindly challenges Linger, it is very likely that he will die completely. This is the essence of the system's plunder. If you defeat the opponent, you will get everything of the opponent. If you fail, you will also be ruthlessly plundered by the system. In other words, Dustless can't casually challenge Linger from now on. The price of failure is simply unbearable. So, are you sure you still want to challenge me now? Linger stared at Wu Qin with interest and continued to speak softly. Her tone was somewhat filled with schadenfreude. Of course. Dustless was about to say that of course he wants to challenge Madara, but Linger's words suddenly dispelled Dustless's idea. Uchiha Madara wasn't in his strongest state just now. If you choose to practice next, you will face the Jubi's Jinchuriki at his peak. Hearing this, Wu Qin swallowed back the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Not to mention how uncomfortable it was. His pupils kept changing back and forth, and his shining eyes dimmed again. Until now, Dustless has no way to restrain Luan Mu. He can only rely on his elemental transformation to defend himself. If he challenges Uchiha Madara, he can only take a beating. Uchiha Madara with the Jubi is definitely several times stronger than when he was in his pure Rinnegan. Let's fight brother Uchiha first. Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind. Although the one who challenged Sasuke was definitely Uchiha Sasuke, it was obvious that there was still a big gap between him and Jubi's Jinchuriki Uchiha Madara. Even if he got the gift of Rakuto, an open 6-tomo Rinnegan, Dust was confident that he could take him down. In fact, what attracts Dustless the most is not Uchiha Sasuke's ability. The 6-tomo Rinnegan is very tempting, but it belongs to someone else from the beginning to the end. What concerns Dustless the most is that defeating Uchiha Sasuke means that he can take everything from him, including his identity as Indra's reincarnation. It means that after Dustless integrates with Hashirama, or Uzumaki Naruto's chakra, he can open his own Rinnegan. Although Uchiha Madara is also Indra's reincarnation, Dustless still chose to pinch Uchiha Sasuke. After Uchiha Sasuke received the gift of the Rakuto, he opened the 6-tomo Rinnegan, and so did Uzumaki Naruto. But even so, facing the Jubi's Jinchuriki, Uchiha Madara, they were still defeated. If it wasn't for Black Zetsu's sneak attack on Uchiha Madara, I'm afraid that even if Uchiha Sasuke could really hit him, he would end up losing 800 of his own men. Therefore, even if Uchiha Sasuke used the 6-tomo Sharingan, he would still be defeated by Uchiha Madara. Have you thought about it? Looking at Dustless's eyes, Linger asked indifferently. We'll talk about it later, that's all for today. Hearing this, Dustless shook his head. He can train Uchiha Sasuke at any time, but Uchiha Madara's plan on the earth will be implemented soon, and some things need to be arranged in advance. The flames of the Third Shinobi World War spread all over the world. Although the Cloud Village was attacked by Dustless, it didn't reach the extent of hurting them, so they chose to continue fighting against the Rock Village. As for the attack by Dustless, they chose to remain silent and pretend that nothing happened, but secretly sent people to search for Dustless's traces. Seeing is believing. This is what the Six Paths Sunnin created. I don't need to add any details. On the quiet plains, countless ninjas could be seen killing each other. The two sides were like blood enemies, mercilessly killing each other. Dustless smiled and looked at the silver-haired, curvy girl beside him, and breathed a sigh of relief. He spent a lot of effort to deceive this super fighter from the moon, and even signed a lot of unequal treaties. Otsutsuki Hagura bit his thin lips and chose to be silent. Indeed, as Dustless said, chakra is not a bridge to communicate with each other, but the root of killing each other. If there was no so-called chakra, these people would never be as unscrupulous as they are now. Unconsciously, Otsutsuki Hagura's heart also quietly changed. You want to see the Ghetto Mazo? I'll take you to see it now. That you're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.